Mm-hmm.
I know the sequel outline from typo. She wants the one that was good for boyfriend. No, that was Darcy. She's not part of the OC. She has one. Talks about the millions of miles. I don't mind it's like every single time I post something, oh yeah, they're like 3 days in this park. They're like 8 activities, 12 miles each. You telling me you got up today?
All right.
Went to classes and was ready
Left off here. Started talking about bats. Before I forget, Davelina asked me, how many of you need to register for classes still? Anybody looking for electives? Didn't think so. Her endocrine class only has one student, so she's like, it might get canceled.
What class is it? I saw that email.
Endocrinology.
And what is that?
Study of hormones. If you're IOB, then it makes sense to take it because it's a biology elective. If you're not IOB, if you're ECB, then it's kind of like not really any reason for you to take that. So the only reason I would, well, one of the only reasons I take it now is because comparative isn't taught since Kurt's gone. If Kurt was still here, then comparative would be the better class to take, honestly. But no one now can teach that, so you know. All right, bats. We started talking about bats a little bit more, yeah. And we're on here, so we're Chiroptera. Bats are about the largest group of mammals there is, besides rodents, really. Or no, even including rodents, there are more bats than there are rodents. Not all of them use echolocation, though. Most of them do, but not all of them, which is interesting, right? Think some fruit bats, right? They don't really need to do echolocation at all. They're gigantic and they can just hang there and chill out and eat some fruit. And they range from being exceedingly small, like to a few ounces, to a few pounds, a couple of kilograms, depending on what bat it is. Their phylogeny is still in process of being worked out. It's becoming a little bit better, but you know, it's still not quite there yet. There's so many of them that genetic analysis hasn't been done on all of them, obviously. So that's still kind of up in the air. You have Yangoptera here, which is microbats, Pteropodidae, which is fruit bats, and then down here you can see the split off. You have Rhinolophiidae and Megalomatidae up here, and then horseshoe bats and different allies, which are really, really small bats that are echolocating insects. Think moths or like mosquitoes, flies, stuff like that. These guys are the biggest ones, right? Fruit bats. These are big for what they are. They look like vampire bats, but they're a little bit bigger. Vampire bats are actually pretty small. They'll fit in your hand most of the time, right? So, okay. This is the smallest bat there is. It could be the smallest mammal. It's kind of uncertain, but look how tiny he is. This is hand of a, I don't know, average sized person, I guess. So he's about this big or so. Look at how small he is. So what? Oh, yeah, half that size. Okay. A bat's wing is made up of bone, of course. There's the rigid structure of it, but it's got a lot of smooth muscle in there. And it's muscle that's going both directions. So you have muscle that's going horizontally throughout the wing and then vertically throughout the wing as well. So it allows them to control and manipulate their wing such that they could redirect easily, and they can hover by getting lift on the upbeat as well as the downbeat. So unlike a bird's wing where it's pretty much just the downbeat and they can control like the rudder that they have with their tail and the uvula that's there, bat can do both. I think hummingbirds are really the only ones that can hover pretty well. Outside of that, all the other ones kind of, they're either moving forward or down or up, and that's pretty much it, right? A bat is able to do all of that. So they're generally better flyers than birds in that way, which is fun. All right, there's a couple different flight membranes here. The chiropagodium here, this is like the muscle tissue of the wing, or like the big part of the wing. So if you were to like look at anything here and try to pick out the different important structures, forearm, which is fused between the ulna and radius, pick out their digits. Thumb is digit 1, then you have 2, 3 out here, 4, and 5 coming down. So they have all of them. They're just reduced in some way, right, as far as the thumb goes, and then elongated in others, depending on where that's at in bat, right? Uropagodium down here would be their tail. This is a megacopteran, a giant fruit bat. Anyone ever seen one of these in the zoo? Yeah. They get to be to where their wingspan is like 7, 8 feet when they're like as big as they'll get. On average, it's closer to like 6.5 or so. But they are quite big. And they're adorable. If you look up a picture of their face, it just looks like a little dog. Just like a little sky dog hanging out. But there are tens of species of fruit bats. There's not just like this one or a couple. There's plenty of them. Okay. What are some of the impacts of bats, though, or what are they important in? One thing that they are important to you for is disease transmission. They act as a vector, right? Famously, most recently, what's the scenario with bats being a vector? COVID. COVID was transferred via a bat. Well, you know. I mean, allegedly. I think we're pretty well set on it was. Do you know where at?
Wuhan?
Wuhan, China. Yep. I don't know. You could look up a video, but there have been now researchers that have gone to Wuhan and been like, was it here? And then they get into Wuhan. They're like, no, it was the trading post or whatever over there. And you get to the trading post, like, we're at here. It's like, no, it wasn't us. It was like these guys down there. And then they like go there, and then it's like, oh, it wasn't us. It was the guys downstairs. And then like it just keeps getting passed and passed and passed. What is one reason you think that this is a problem? One could be that bats kind of have a really high tolerance for pathogens. And so you can have a bat easily be a carrier and not be affected by a lot of things. As well as where bats are, they're pretty successful. So you get massive numbers of them to make them, it's easier for them to be a vector as a result. Okay. On the other side of it, is there any kind of benefits that you get from having bats around?
Insect control.
Insect control is a major one. So what? They're also pollinators, yeah. So insect control is huge in areas like, I don't know, East Central Africa, for example. If you're thinking about like, what's there? Ghana. The only one I can think of at the moment. Sierra Leone, something, whatever. Right in there, where Ebola is really present. right? Ebola epidemics. The more bats there, the better, because they're controlling mosquito populations to a certain degree, such that the Ebola outbreak would be lessened because you have so many bats. I've seen bats in Chubbuck a bunch, actually. There's a good number of them in Chubbuck. And I actually, when Casey and I first moved here, I noticed we lived in the Pine Ridge apartments over there. I noticed there's like never any mosquitoes around, like at all. And I was like, I wonder why. And then I saw bats hanging from trees right outside the apartment. I was like, oh, that's got to be why. Thanks, buddy. And, never once got bit. Okay. Vampire bats, on the other hand, are ones that would be responsible for transmitting more diseases to us, right? What's the chance you think of a vampire bat actually like biting you? Pretty slim, like next to nothing, right? Even if you're in the areas of like Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, where they frequent and exist, their distribution is still quite healthy. The chances you get bit by a vampire bat are like next to zero. How are they going to transfer pathogens to you then if it's like next to zero? Biting pets and or stuff we eat, yeah. So particularly cows, some kind of livestock, and it'll just move up the food chain, yeah. Okay. One thing, aside from pollination, they're also responsible for a lot of seed dispersal, particularly these guys. If you like tequila, then you would have to thank these guys for pollinating tequila, because without them, the agave plant is yeah, Tara. I know. That's why he looks at you like what. But without them, you would have no agave plants in order to get them. How do you think these guys are pollinating it? Or how do you think they feed, rather? Nectar. What system do you think they use to feed on nectar? Tongue. There's a couple different evolutions in bats to get nectar. Which one do you think these guys are? Okay, stick their whole face in it, and do they lap it up like a dog, or do they suck it through a straw? Straw. They have capillaries on either side of their tongue, such that when you stick it in there, it fills with capillary action and it gets sucked up into their mouth that way. So there's a few, I think I said this before, but there's a few that at the end of their tongue, they have like little hairs on the end, like little cilia almost. It looks barbed when you zoom in on it. That creates more surface area, which breaks the surface tension of the nectar itself. It attaches to their tongue, they can lap it up like a dog or whatever. And then there's other bats that when they stick their tongue down in there, there's like little holes on either side, and such that it forms a suction from the capillary action coming up. Unfortunately, many bats, not just these guys, but many bats are highly specialized in the environment, in the landscape in which they are in. And climate change is like a big deal, especially because